Good evening. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Wilmette Zoning Board of Appeals. Ms. Roberts, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Boyer.
Here.
Mr. Robke.
Here.
Mr. Schneider.
Here.
Mr. Tritzes.
Here.
Chairman Sermon.
Here. Ladies and gentlemen, for those that are new to our proceedings, the purpose of this board is to hear the evidence on the applications for variances from our zoning ordinance and on applications for special use. Based upon the evidence that we will hear this evening, we will make recommendations to the Village Board of Trustees to whether the applications that come before us this evening should be granted or denied. We will vote to recommend granting or denying each application for variation based on whether the application meets the standards of review set forth in Section 5.4.f of our Village Ordinance. The Village Board of Trustees will consider the recommendations this evening at their next regular scheduled meeting on January 23rd.
Correct.
Our recommendations to the board are advisory only. The Village Board has the final say on all applications and will make its own determination on whether to grant or deny them. The Village Board is not legally bound by our recommendations. There is one small exception to the rule. If this board makes a negative recommendation with respect to the application, in order for the Village Board of Trustees to approve the application, a supermajority of 5 board members must vote to approve it rather than the simple majority of 4. There is one other small peculiarity to our proceedings of which you should be aware. The board does not operate on a majority rule. We operate instead of on a tyranny of 4. In other words, no matter how many board members are present on a given evening, in order to get a positive recommendation from the board, the applicant must receive 4 affirmative votes. Ordinarily, this board consists of 7. Tonight, due to some absences, only 5 members are present. Ms. Roberts, as the Assistant Director of Community Development, sits with us tonight in an advisory capacity only and is not a voting member of the board. Please be aware, therefore, that the vote of 3-2 in favor of an application will technically go into the record as a negative recommendation with the legal effect that I had previously described. In recognition of this unusual feature in our procedure, when we do not have all the members of the board on a given evening, we give the applicants who are scheduled to come before us that night the option of requesting a continuance to the next available date on the schedule. The next available date on the for any applicant would be who would like to request a continuance would be the 17th, January 17th. There's no penalty for asking for continuance. No such request will be held against you or when your case is eventually heard. If you wish to ask for continuance, however, you must do so at the beginning of your presentation before you make any substantive arguments as to the merits of your case. Please also be aware that if you request continuance, there is no guarantee of how many board members will be present at the evening to which the case is continued. The cases we shall hear this evening will be heard in the order set forth on the pre-printed agenda located at the table near the door when you first came in. When your case is called, please proceed to the podium, state your name, address, and tell us exactly how your application meets the standards of review for that are applicable to it. Each member of the board is a longtime resident of the village and has visited your property during the past week. In addition, we have received from the village staff green booklets containing all the written information that you had submitted in support of your application, as well as other correspondence the village has received. Accordingly, it is not necessary to repeat all that you have already stated in writing. Please just hit the high points with particular attention to why you believe your application meets the standards of review. After the applicant has had a chance to speak, we will open the podium to others who wish to speak either for or against the application. Everyone will be permitted to have their say, though we do ask that you keep your comments as short and to the point as possible. After we have heard all the presentations, I will close the evidence, and the members of the board will discuss what they have heard and take a vote. Once the evidence is closed, no further testimony on the application may be offered. The only people entitled to speak during that part of the proceeding will be the members of the board. This meeting is a legal proceeding, and all testimony given tonight must be given under oath. If you are here and planning to testify, I would ask that you raise your right hand at this time to be sworn. Do you swear to affirm that you will tell the truth in the testimony that you're about to give? If so, please say, I do. Ms. Roberts, will you please call the first case of the evening?
Our first case is 2018 Z02, 3730 Lake Avenue. The applicants have submitted an email requesting that the case be tabled to January 17th.
We need to have a motion for that.
Do you need a motion?
Okay.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Okay, will you call the next case?
All right, our next case is 2017 Z51, 154 Maple Avenue. This is a request for an 18.5-foot fence height variation and a variation to allow fencing lighter than 11 gauge to permit the replacement of a 25-foot tall wire fence in the side and rear yards.
Welcome back.
Well, since we were last here, we found a fence company that's both willing and able to replicate our golf course fence, which is a big deal. And on December 6th, we had a meeting with all the people involved, which was Lisa Roberts and Ted Blumenthal and the fence people and the ComEd people, because, you know, there's wires up where the current fence is.
Excuse me for 1 second. Could you just introduce yourself for the
Oh,
record?
I'm sorry. Suzanne Strauss, 154 Maple Avenue.
Thank you.
Sure, sorry. So everyone was there, everybody was on the same page hearing everything. And the ComEd guy said he has no problem with replicating what we have, putting the fence back exactly where it is, that there's no law or anything. It's not going to be dangerous for the ComEd wires at all. And he said they're the only live wires. I believe you were there. He said those were the only live wires. All those other wires are telephone or TV cable or something, and the other wires are not a problem.
Sure.
So he was happy. Lisa and Ted got to ask all their questions. I was happy. The fence guy was happy. So anyway, everybody heard each other and agreed that the fence could be replicated.
Okay, and the length of it is going to match the existing perimeter?
It's going to look, hopefully, exactly, yeah, exactly
Okay.
the way it is. It goes, you know, it has an L shape. You have a picture in there. So after that meeting, the fence store sent Lisa and me the picture that you have of what the fence will look like, which is exactly what it looked like before we had the storm.
I just have a quick question. So I see there's the chicken wire, there's 2x6
Yes,
every 5 feet.
10 feet, I believe. It's 10 feet between the
2 by
uprights.
6, right, 2 by
10
6
feet.
every 5,
And
but
and the
then
2 by 6s are every 6 feet.
every 6. What is this, what's the 24-foot run? Is that just a 4x4?
It's a round post that is very slightly tapered. He said it's weatherized or whatever they call
It's
it.
like a telephone pole. It's a tapered telephone pole, basically.
Basically. He said it's made by the same company that makes telephone poles.
Okay. All right.
Any other questions? No?
Just one question.
Sure.
Did you consider netting at all rather than chicken
In
wire?
netting? No, for 2 reasons. Number one, the chicken wire totally disappears, so you can't see it. The netting, which is usually white or green, definitely you can see. The second reason is that, I mean, we talked to people about it. It disintegrates after 5 years. You have to replace it after 5 years. So that would be a real mess.
And if you had, I think you had conversations previously with your neighbors?
With our
regarding-
neighbors?
Yeah, they're in favor of this? I
Yeah,
thought there was
yeah,
one
yeah.
previously.
You know, there's nobody There's nobody but the golf course
Okay.
where the fence is, and the golf course is happy about it.
Okay. The only other question I had was, typically for fences, they don't require any architect or engineering permit, but for this, because of the height, it'll be up to the village on whether they would like to do that or not, since it is substantially tall, and
Right.
the lateral stability of it over time. So
So
work with lease. You can work with lease. It's just
I'm assuming the fence company that's selling to is also installing and designing it, so I'm sure there's
They may be
interface,
able to stamp
so,
it.
yeah.
Okay.
It's really to protect you.
Okay.
So, okay. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak either for or against this tonight? No? See no one. Is there any last-minute things you'd like to add? No?
No.
Okay. Well, at this time, I would like to close the case and ask if anyone on the board would like to make a motion. Mr. Robke?
Move to recommend granting a request for an 18.5-foot fence height variation and a variation to allow fencing lighter than 11 gauge to permit the replacement of a 25-foot tall wire fence in the side and rear yard at 154 Maple Avenue in accordance with plans submitted.
Do I have a second? Second. Mr. Boyer? Your motion, Mr. Robke?
Thank you for your efforts to come back and give us the additional information. The intent is really to replicate, in essence, to repair and bring up to a proper condition an existing fence. I can support this variation. It's a very unique property with the golf course, and it really is an existing condition. I'd rather see this replaced than leave the one there
Yeah.
continue to dilapidate and potentially be a safety issue.
Okay. Mr. Boyer?
Right, and I think there's a safety issue on the side of the homeowner as well for protecting themselves from errant golf balls. So I agree with everything Mr. Robke said. I can support it.
Okay. Anybody else?
Replacing with the same is easy.
Yeah. Mr. Stein, nothing? Okay. Well then, Ms. Roberts, will you please call the vote?
Mr. Robke,
Yes.
Mr. Boyer,
Yes.
Mr. Schneider,
Yes.
Mr. Tritzis,
Yes.
Chairman Sermon.
And the chair votes aye as well. So this will go as a positive recommendation to the village board, which meets on January 23rd. So with the applicant,
Do we need to be at the village board meeting?
you don't need to be, but we typically recommend that you
Okay.
are there.
January
So
23rd.
if you could come up and sign these, please.
This just has a meeting date, so you can...
I move to authorize the chairman to prepare the report and recommendation for the zoning board of appeals for case number 2017 Z51.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'm going to keep that one, and that one's for you. Thank you. Oh, you keep that one. Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
Ms. Roberts, will you please call the next case of the evening?
Our next case is 2018 Z03, 900 Oakwood Avenue. This is a request for a 3.13-foot front yard setback variation, a 4-foot side yard adjoining a street setback variation, a 3.13-foot front yard porch setback variation, a 3.13-foot front yard porch step setback variation, and a 194.14 square foot side yard adjoining a street impervious surface coverage variation to permit the replacement of a one-story sunroom and construct a new front porch and steps on the legal non-conforming structure.
Hello, good evening.
Hi, I'm Eric Weffing, and I'm here representing Jerry and Elaine Lenz.
Okay, and
And-
your address? You can just use your office address.
Oh, the office address is 133 North Jefferson in Chicago,
Okay,
the Weffing Design Studio. And I want to start by thanking you guys for what you guys do. I think, especially with historic homes, it's we need in order to build in conditions where you need a variation. It's important what you guys are doing. So thank you.
sure.
So Lisa, in order to get this
Oh,
up,
pull the knob.
this very here.
Yep, there you go. Tim will get it up in just a minute.
Okay.
Yeah.
As big as it can get, I guess.
He might zoom in a little bit.
Okay, so I just wanted to give, oh, there we go. So I just want to give you a little background. Jerry, they moved into the house. The house was built in 1922, and they moved into the house in 1985. Jerry, we're talking about it. He says the last time the Bears have been good, that they've been in Wilmette for longtime residents. We've done 2 projects in the house already, and those projects were, the first was in the attic for Jerry's collection of trains and cars. We built storage for these, which is quite a car collection. And they were all in the basement. We renovated the attic. And the second project was for another car, which was there in the garage, which we did a few years later. And this has been in the parade, right? You guys have taken this to the parade. And they're long time. They're St. Francis. They've been with St. Francis since 1985. They're civic-minded and very good neighbors. And what is it you call it? The wagon pull that you guys do? Where they're within the neighborhood. They go around to different. It was your 50th wedding anniversary, right? Just celebrate. And one of the impetus for this project was one to replace the sunroom, which is falling off the house. So it's an existing sunroom that they want to just replace that as is. The second piece of the project is to add a front porch because they've never really liked the little porch, so they could sit out front along Oakwood. As you can see here, the porch itself is actually falling off. So the situation with the house, the front yard setback is basically an average of along the street. So it ends up being 32 feet as opposed to a typical 25 feet. So the setback itself, and we did a little 3D model of this. This is a 3D model of the house. And you can see we kind of put the setback plane. So there's a good portion of the house is over the setback. This entire side and this entire side are all over the front yard setback and the side yard setback. So in order to just rebuild this, we're already non-conforming. So the project really is just asking for the ability to rebuild this and then add a front porch. This front porch is, by code, we're allowed to go 6 feet into the front yard off of it. I actually think the village should re-look at that and make it 8 feet, because you get all these developer homes that build just a 6-foot porch, and you just see 2 chairs, you actually can't gather. So some of the historic porches of Wilmette are more like 8 feet, and I think that's something that we should look at. I think the real reason for it is architecturally, it adds some interest to the front, but it also should add a place for people to really gather. We would love for that to be 8 feet, but we feel like we're already asking for variation, so we're just going from 6 feet from the face, from here, from the face of here, 6 feet out with this porch. If that were, we would not need a variation for either that 6 feet or the 3-foot extension of the stairs if the front of the house wasn't already over the setback. So we're really just asking to build from the face what you normally would be able to build if the setback were not 32 feet off the front yard.
So you're saying if the front of the house matched with the setback, then you could build that porch?
Build that porch and those stairs.
Okay.
So that is specifically right out of the code.
Okay.
6 feet and then 3 feet beyond that.
So it's really talking about 2'10" and a half then, when you're out further.
Yeah, that's correct. In terms of the response to the questions and standards of review, a lot of this has to do with the fact that the house has been existed since 1922 in this condition. So that is the hardship, really, is the pre-existing noncompliance of the structure. In terms of the plight of the property owner, was it created by the owner and due to unique circumstances? We say those unique circumstances were them buying this house and buying it before the zoning code as it changed, and the front yard setback was then non-compliant. So we do think that is a unique condition. Difficulty or hardship is peculiar to the property in question, is not generally shared. Again, it is a unique condition because because when the house was built. So if you look along that street, there are varying conditions along that street, but they are on a corner lot, which unfortunately is over on both sides. But what is interesting is if you look at the site plan, back to it. They haven't built in this entire area. So there's a good portion that they could have built on this side. So it's almost as if the house was just shifted over. So because if the house had been moved in that direction, it would all have been fine. So, in fact, it would easily have fit within these two. So if it had been a regular lot in Wilmette, instead of having a 15-foot side yard, it would be
And if it was shifted to the north and to the west,
Yeah.
you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And the current foundation below the porch is not adequate,
No.
correct? That's the
No.
reason it's
It's-
failing.
And inside, Jack
Sure.
slide across the floor, right? So it's,
So let's go back to, so we can talk about hardship a little bit more when you're going through your presentation. So there's five variance requests. Three of them, what I understand, deal with the original siding of the house. And then two of them truly deal with the new porch that's, the 6-foot porch that's being added on. Would you agree? So 1, 2, and 5 would be
Yeah.
because of the original siding of the house. 3 and 4 are because of the new porch.
well, I do think there is a hardship in 4 of,
Well, no, hold on, but would you agree that 3 and 4 are because of the new porch?
well,
And then 1, 2, and 5 are because of the siding of the house?
well, I do think that, the hardship related to 4, which is the inability to kind of, to maintain the value of that house because it's falling apart, is related to where it's sited, because of the existing sunroom. You see what I mean?
Right, but the next question I would have right after this is the sunroom, I'm assuming that was an original porch, and it was created, living space was captured
Oh.
at some point.
It actually was, that's a good question. It hasn't been since they.
For a long time, but
a really
the
long time.
original house, I'm assuming
I
that
guess
was
you
the
could
original
say,
porch.
you could say that. I mean, it's been a living room for 50
Which is
years.
typical for a lot of homes, a lot of foursquares do that. They
Yeah.
they pull that
I
in
see-
living
no, I
space,
see what
which
you're
is
saying.
great.
I see what you're
But
saying.
originally, that would be the porch, and therefore that's why it's falling down, because the foundation is failing, and that it wasn't really built,
Sure.
there's no
Yeah, I can't-
basement
I
underneath
can't-
there.
Yeah,
Right.
I can see that, yeah.
So what I'm getting at is that we're to really want to try to get in the discussion we're going to have is based on hardship. So we have a porch that's failing, right? And so 1, 3, 1, 2, and 5
The sunroof is.
are based on the sunroom, the replacement of the sunroof. But 3 and 4, in a lot of respects, is because of, the ask is because of the new porch.
If you look at,
Well, I don't know that I do agree, because,
But yeah, and if you don't, that's great. And so,
yeah, I mean, I'm just saying for
Understand.
3, the difficulty hardship is peculiar to this property. I mean, wouldn't you agree it's the hardship that's peculiar to this property is that it's built over the setback? Is what?
can you look at 1.7, which is our 1.7, which is a plan of the replacement of the sun porch and the addition to the porch.
Yeah, yep.
So, if I understand correctly, and what was said here is that what you're, on the one hand, you are replacing the sunroom because it is falling apart. You are also want to continue to obviously replace the entrance deck and the stairs to the deck. What you're adding is basically the incremental addition is the porch, which is 6 feet by the width of the, which is, looks like 12 feet.
That's correct.
That's the net addition,
That's correct.
which is, I think, results in the variation requests, was it 3 or 4?
3 and 4.
3 and 4. What you, if you had come in, I mean, one ask would have been, look, the sunroom is failing. Structurally, it is obsolete. We need to replace it. And we're going to literally replace everything that is there, the sunroom and the stairs and that walkway. But in addition to that, we also want to now ask for an incremental area call it the porch.
Well,
I think our point is that if the setback had been a 25-foot setback instead of a 32-foot setback, which the majority of Wilmette lots are 25 feet, then we would be well within the code to build the porch, I guess.
Could one also say that if the porch had not been converted to a sunroom, then you would have a porch that was within conformance of the code?
If the porch had not been
I mean, it
converted to a
seems as
sunroom?
though the sunroom, if it has inadequate foundation, if the floor is sloping, it was likely a porch that got,
Could be. I mean, the way it's used in the house is a living room.
Sure.
Right? So, and they're well under the FAR, in terms of, so it really is, has been since they've lived there.
I think, I'm not sure if I'm speaking out loud, but I think most of the board would approve replacing the sunroom. We don't have a problem with that part of it because we know it's existing. I think it's the issue of adding another porch on top of that. And, our role is to look at the different codes and interpret them the best we can. And when you look at the house setbacks, and I looked at the houses today, that sunroom really aligns or is out further than most of the homes on that block, at least to the east, to the west. To the east, one house is back further and then it steps back, so it's tough to look and align. So, and a hardship can't be that, I'd like to have a larger living room or, we understand the request for the seating, but that's the reason for the hesitation with the board right now. So, and I understand the need to encourage, the village encourages you to have porches to make it more aesthetically pleasing.
But I thought they did.
Yeah, they do.
I have a question for Lisa, actually. I counted one new house on the block. Is that right?
That could be.
That was included in this the front yard setback worksheet to establish their lot line.
So that the front yard setbacks are set in time at 2003. So even if a new home has gone in, we would not change the setback based on that.
Right, but the house before it, I just thought of this. The house before it may have had a setback which was a lot closer than where now it sits.
It's possible, sure.
It's possible.
Yeah. I could mention
Do we know which house was?
Okay.
Do we know which? Is there any way to know what house was new construction and where that original house was sitting? Because
I could look it up. I
can't do it on the fly right now. But the reason why is, if that house, now it may not seem, it's lined up with some of the other houses, but it may have been lined up with the house that was torn down.
Sure.
Right, and so it further exacerbates the look of a nonconformity. Right. So.
Yeah.
Lisa, I do have a question. If, say that the existing porch was in good condition, and they weren't doing any work to that, and they came back and said, we just want to add a porch to the front of the house, could they do it then?
Actually, they could. Yeah, I'm sorry, I did not include that in the report. The proposal for the porch, if they were just doing the porch and not replacing the sunroom, would actually qualify for administrative review. There's a provision to allow for relief, basically, to even do a new porch, not just a replacement, as long as you're keeping the encroachment, so up to a 6-foot encroachment. Basically, you're getting a variation for just the non-conforming front yard of the house, and then you're tacking on a conforming porch and a conforming stair in front of it. So it could have applied for administrative review if it
So
weren't
if
for the
this
other
was
part
two,
of it.
if this was two separate projects,
Right,
it would get approved.
right. Yeah,
Well, would it be reviewed or would it be approved?
Yeah, I
The
guess, yeah.
administrative committee, I believe, would have supported it. It would then be noticed to the neighbors who would have an opportunity to comment.
Okay. So
Repeat,
consider
we
it.
took-
repeat that one more time. You just,
think we
just so
took
I understand.
advice
The
of-
administrative review would have approved the
Yeah.
entire request.
For the
And
porch,
if it was
right.
two different-
Yeah, right.
If you, if the, say the existing porch was in good shape, and the existing sunroom, I'm sorry, was in good shape, and if they came, the applicant came in and said, I want to add this porch to my existing house, then it would go through an administrative review, and
And speaking as one half of the committee, I believe we would support it
I
because it
think
falls
that's,
within the parameters.
that's why I'm a little thrown off. I completely understand all of our discussion. Like, we didn't think that was as much of the issue as, the being over the setback and rebuilding the sunroom, because we had worked it through it with Rachel and Lisa, but I totally understand what you guys are saying. So we chose to bundle them together as opposed to just asking for the sunroom and then sending it through the village. So that could have been.
But Lisa, you said administrative if they were two separate, administrative could do both of them?
No, the replacement of the sunroom we could not do because it's actually being removed.
If we could have, we would have done that.
Yeah.
So we could have been building by now.
Right.
But instead, we're,
I guess, I know there are a few people that have shown up. We'll give you an opportunity after they speak, unless you want to present anything else right now.
I think it's pretty clear, unless you guys have more questions.
Okay, then we'll see what the audience members that have come in.
Just one, I was just thinking, you were making the comment like, oh, we've got all this room on the side that we could have built all this stuff. Was there ever a thought of moving all that extra space to that side, then you're building within your right, and then you don't have to get it?
Well, it's just not,
It's a different look, but I'm just curious if you...
they love the house the way it is. Jerry and Elaine do. So it would involve reconfiguring the entire downstairs, because that's where the stair is on that side. And in
But
order
just
to-
I was talking about just the porch piece? Maybe I'm missing something.
Oh, you're thinking if you could
Oh,
continue it,
continue the porch
Yeah, I mean, if it
around the
there's plenty
side.
of porches that wrap on the side versus in the front, so I was just curious if you have that
No,
space on.
yeah, we looked at some options to do that, but I think if we can't, see the view down Oakwood is what, because they have that view in the sunroom, but it's just not outside, so you can't talk with people. So they really wanted that. They weren't as interested in just building the porch. They really liked the idea of being out, in a front porch, so they could have more public interaction. So, but if we can move the whole house over,
No, I was just talking
That-
about
that would've
the sitting area porch, if it wrapped around the side, you could probably get pretty close to the same
it's just
area.
narrow. That's the problem. And the front, I think for Jerry and both of Jerry and Elaine, they've never really liked the look of the front of the house. So it was a chance to really improve the look of the face of the house on Oakwood. And that's kind of the only thing that they didn't like. I think you always painted that side last, right, Jerry? And so it was an opportunity to really improve that. That wouldn't necessarily be the same if you went around the side. But so, yeah.
Maybe the Bears would win if he wrapped it around the side.
Last question to our statistician, Lisa. It's a 109-foot lot in the depth, right? Do you have any idea how many 100-foot lots there are in this part of town?
I don't, less
But
than
it
a
is something
dozen.
that's not typical.
It's not typical, no.
Yeah, they don't really have much of a backyard. It's really that.
Could we put the doors on the side of the garage? They could open to the north so that they could use the garage as kind of an extension out to that side yard because it's so small and back. And it actually works pretty well. And they're friendly with the neighbors to the north. But I also live on a corner lot on the other side on 11 Isabella. And so we just have a little walk to the alley. So I think properties like this in Wilmette are unique, and they actually, for us, we were able to afford it because it wasn't a full lot. So like having the diversity of property types is really interesting. It's just difficult when you really want to build. When you start to build, you run into, some issues. But
Okay.
it's up for me.
Well, let's see what the audience member are. I know some people have come in after we had sworn in. The people in the audience, are you anticipating speaking? Okay. Then this meeting is legal proceeding, and all testimony tonight will be given under oath. If you are here and planning to testify, I would ask that you raise your hand at this time. So that would be for people that haven't. Okay. Do you swear or affirm that you will tell the truth in the testimony that you are about to give? If so, please say, I do. Okay. All right. We could start right up here in the front. If you could introduce yourself
My name
and
is-
your address, please.
Actually, could you leave that open? Yes, sure. Sorry. My name is Siobhan Vuchla. I live at 427 9th Street, which is 4 houses north of where Mr. and Mrs. Lenz live.
Okay.
I'm here on behalf of myself and my husband and several other neighbours who can't make it tonight to say that we completely support this application. We think that it will not only enhance their lives, but enhance our neighbourhood by making this house look much nicer from the outside and by giving us another porch that we can gather on with Mr. and Mrs. Lenz and their friends. The other thing I want to point out, I was listening closely to this discussion, is we keep talking about it being a sunroom, and technically it is, but it really is the front room of their house. If you look at the sketch there, the curved, the bow window there, that's the dining room. And so if you don't consider the sunroom part of the living room, you just have this tiny strip that becomes the living room, which really isn't functional as a living room. So it's not a case of taking something that, just grabbing extra space. It really is important for them to have it for the front room. And I think adding the porch at this time is such an enhancement. I also think it's really interesting that we're having the meeting today with the weather as it's been outside for the past couple of weeks and the way it will be for the next week, because when you consider the fact that this is so old and all the windows need to be replaced, it would be such a poor investment to replace them with the current structure. You really do need to rebuild the whole thing to get this room heated properly and insulated properly, especially for an elderly couple like we have here. I also think adding the porch is a safety issue for people. We built our porch about 10 years ago, and it's been much easier to be able to have people leave packages off, to see who's coming up, to be able to talk with different people who come up to the door rather than having them step inside your door. Again, for an elderly couple, I think that's a safety issue that we need to consider. And it's going to be a lovely enhancement if you do allow it. With regard to pulling it around the other side, again, that's just not doable because it's not a porch, a sunroom that could be integrated as part of a porch. It really is a living room, and then you're talking about a new section again that comes around by the fireplace. And I just don't even see how aesthetically or structurally that would work without rebuilding the whole thing. So the bottom line, and I'm happy to answer any questions about anything I've said, is I think from the point of aesthetics, enhancing the neighborhood, we're all in favor of it, and a safety issue and a heating issue for Elaine and Jerry, Mr. and Mrs. Lenz. This is something I would strongly ask you to approve.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Would you like to go ahead?
Hi. I'm Mary Beth Cummings. I also am here on behalf of myself, my husband. I live across the street from Jerry and Elaine at 834 Oakwood Avenue. And I actually grew up at 834 Oakwood Avenue, so I've lived across the street from that house for, we think it's been about 40 years. Left for a while and I'm now back in the house. Jerry and Elaine have done some really nice renovations on the house. They're interesting. it's a beautiful old house, and what they've done is really enhanced it. And this project, we believe, will continue to enhance it. The porch is a space that they will undoubtedly use. They're, a really important part of our neighborhood. They're wonderful neighbors, and we know that we'll be walking by in the summer and be invited to come sit down and chat for a while on this porch. It's a lovely porch. It seems like a really appropriate enhancement to the house, and the sunroom clearly needs some work, and so we would really like to put our support behind the full project.
Okay, and just your address, are you across the street to the south?
We're
or to the
immediately
east?
east.
To the
We're
east.
We're on the
Okay.
northeast corner there.
Okay.
I had one other thought, which is it's a corner lot, and being on a corner lot, kind of, adding extra space, the corner provides some room for extra space to be added on, and we feel like that's definitely the case for them, that they're on the corner. I think you asked about 100-foot lots. All four corners of that particular block, bounded by 9th, 10th, Linden, and Oakwood, all four of them are those shortened lots. So the corner of 10th Street and Oakwood also has a 100-foot lot line, and the corner of Linden and 10th Street has 100-foot, and the corner of 9th and Linden has 100-foot as well. So all four of those are the same lot formation that Jerry and Elaine happen to have.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Frank Paul, and I live at 904 Oakwood, so I'm their neighbor to the west. And I think more importantly, it was my house that was subdivided to Jerry and Elaine's house, and to the house to the west of mine, and to the house behind mine to the north. So my house was built back in the 1880s. And anyway, I have three. I'm speaking very much in support of this variance. Number one, what the improvements that they made to their house within the last 4 or 5 years. I've lived in my house for 25 years and been their neighbor for that long. The improvements that they've made to their house have been very nice, very much improvements to the neighborhood, to their house. So I'm very confident that what they're planning to do will be an improvement to their house and to the neighborhood. Secondly, I will just tell you that as opposed to tearing down the house and building a brand new house next to mine, the house behind mine to the north, it was the most incredible nightmare that I've ever had, and has caused incredible damage to my house and to my property. So I'm very much in favor of improvement to a 100-year-old structure as opposed to a tear down. I also have one of the short lots, and it's been a problem. And I think, as been stated tonight, it's really going to improve their ability to live in their house and to continue to have a safe and habitable structure. So that's my thoughts.
And we're just curious, the lot that's just behind you or across the alley was the new one that caused you damage?
To the north of mine.
Okay.
That was a tear down. They decided, by the way, to tear it down this week, some 10 years ago, when the ground was frozen and there was pounding, and I could see the cracks in my walls.
Oh, I see.
As the pounding was going on, to rip down the old house. I'm sure that Jerry and Elaine have some cracks in their house too, because of when the tear down. It was the first week of the year, and I had incredible damage to my house. And
Sorry to hear that.
the developer invited me. He ripped down my wires, my electrical wires, 3 times. Told me that he wanted $50,000 from me to bury the wires. I have my electrical goes across the back of their yard, and why do I need a phone? why do I need phone wires? Can I just get a cellular phone? And, oh, by the way, I should get in line because everybody else is suing him, and he's an attorney. So that's my story.
I just have one other question.
Sure.
So you, being the adjacent neighbor that would be most impacted, you don't have an issue with that porch coming out a little bit further than it is right now?
No.
No, not at all. Okay. Okay, thank you. Let's see. Eric, would you like to add anything else to? No. Well, I guess I'd like to see if anybody else has any questions. Not right now? No? Okay.
Thank you very much.
All righty, thank you. Let's see. At this time, I would like to close the case and ask if one of the board members would like to make a motion. Mr. Boyer?
In regards to case number 2018Z03, I move to recommend granting a request for a 3.13-foot front yard setback variation, a 4-foot side yard adjoining street setback variation, a 3.13-foot front yard porch setback variation, a 3.13-foot front yard porch step setback variation, and a 194.14 square foot side yard adjoining a street impervious surface coverage variation to permit the replacement of a one-story sunroom and construct a new front porch and steps on the legal non-conforming structure at 900 Oakwood Avenue in accordance with the plan submitted.
Do I have a second? Okay, Mr. Rodkey?
So we have 5 variance requests. As we went through before, 1, 2, and 5 really deal with the siding of the house. I don't have any problem with those variances. Seeing as we're just rebuilding it's a request for just rebuilding the sunroom, it's a siding of the home, and it gets caught in the new zoning ordinances. 2 and 3, I did have a concern, and I was stuck on how far the new front porch should be sticking out for a corner lot. But thinking about the hardships that this house has, I think it turns on the small lot size and the original siding of the home. I think it causes the hardship or practical difficulty. I'm comfortable with now the amount that they're asking over the front yard porch setback and step setback. It's only, roughly 3 feet over. And I know we don't look at precedent. However, there are a number of homes that are on smaller lots that needed either complete reconstruction or rehab, and had multiple variances just to have that rehabilitation done. So in light of what I feel is really a relatively small ask and a sympathetic addition to the original home, I can support this.
I would only add that being troubled as well by the front porch and the corner lot and sticking out like that, I think it is a small ask. I was worried about the impact on the neighborhood. Hearing neighbors offer such strong support as longtime residents has removed those concerns from me, and I can support this as well.
I would agree with all that's been said. It's a relatively small request, variation, and I think it will be a pleasant addition to the neighborhood. I can support it.
I don't think I've ever heard neighbors stronger as a recommendation. So that speaks for itself. I mean, that's what neighborhood's about and things like that. So, it wasn't just a little bit, but it was a lot. So clearly, they're the most impacted. It was huge. I also have a super small lot, so I empathize that I drew lines on if I had to rebuild my house, and it's like 5 foot wide. I could build a house, and that was it. So when you have these smaller lots, it's really hard to have this general zoning kind of impact what at the end of the day is you're kind of stuck with. And then the fact that it's we're going to rebuild a thing that we all agree is the easier part to get around. The porch was the tougher part, but it's really an administrative play that they would go that way anyhow. I mean, that makes it pretty easy.
Yeah, I agree. You know, there are many things that contribute to this, the small lot size, the siting of the property, and I appreciate, Eric, that you looked at the depth of the porch and went with 6 feet. I know 8 feet would be ideal, but I appreciate you did that, and I think it's a nice design. The porch isn't overdone by going all the way to the east. You know, it's just a portion, so I'll be able to support it as well. So, Ms. Roberts, will you please call the vote?
Mr. Boyer,
Yes.
Mr. Robke,
Yes.
Mr. Schneider,
Yes.
Mr. Tritzes.
Yes.
Chairman Sermon.
Chair votes aye as well. So that'll go as a positive recommendation to the village board, which will meet on January 23rd. So if you could come up here and sign these.
Move to authorize the chairman to prepare the report and recommendation for zoning board of appeals for case number 2018-C-03.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We do not have any minutes to approve, so unless there's somebody else who would like to make a public comment from the audience, the meeting is finished. Thank you.
Total info. Weather.